Without advertising, most books get stuck selling just to the author's friends and neighbors. People across the country never hear about the book, and sometimes people across town don't hear about it either. Amazon ads can help you get your book outside of your social bubble. How? Find out in this episode of Novel Marketing, the longest running book marketing podcast in the world. And one myth about advertising is that you have to have a series to make ads work. This is not true. You can make ads work with just a single book. And we have a guest author on the show today who's done just that, being able to profitably advertise a book on Amazon, even though he had just one book. Now, he has more than one book now, but he got started, like all authors do, with just one. Scott LaPierre, welcome to the Novel Marketing Podcast.
Thanks, Thomas. Glad to be back with you and your listeners.
Yeah, it is great to have you back. So tell us, how did you get started with Amazon advertising?
Yeah, so I wrote a book and I wanted people to buy it, would be the simple answer. And it was self-published, but the book wasn't selling itself. And I'm looking into marketing efforts. And so Amazon ads were a little ways down the road for me. Interestingly, early on, I read somewhere that someone had spent like $10,000 on Amazon ads for $2,000 in sales. And so I had this super negative view of Amazon ads. It was like, I'll do anything but them. And this is back 2017, 2018. And so I'm trying lots of other stuff. And so I'm sure many of your listeners are familiar with Mark Dawson. And he was experiencing a lot of success with Facebook ads. And so that's the first. So when we talk about success, Thomas, I want to be real clear with your listeners that there are lots of mistakes that I made, lots of money that I wasted. And it wasn't just like success from day one. There's a lot of learning. And I tried Google ads, Twitter ads, and like I just mentioned, Facebook ads. And so I watched some of Mark Dawson's courses, listened to his podcast, got a lot of good information from it. But for whatever reason, I just never had the kind of success with it that he did.
And I want to stop you real quick because this is really common. Almost nobody is successful with advertising right out of the gate. It takes time to find your audience, to find your messaging, to learn how the platform works. And unlike with other marketing techniques, it also takes money. Like every single click costs you money. And so a lot of authors will spend $100 or $500 and they'll lose that money. And then they'll come to some poor conclusions. And one of those conclusions is that advertising doesn't work. And that is objectively false. What's true is that advertising can work and that advertising is not working for you. And what you don't yet know, or you may not know, is why Amazon is not working for you. It could be your book doesn't really appeal to readers. There's something wrong with the cover or the way you're describing it, or the category is not right, and it's just an unappealing book. This is the most common reason, one that people are the least willing to listen to. It's why I developed the ad suitability scanner. It's one of the Patron Toolbox tools. You upload your cover and it will analyze it to see if it's even the kind of cover that can work for advertising. But the other reason, or one of the other reasons, is you just haven't figured out ads yet. It takes fiddling. Going through a course like Mark Dawson's course can help, but nothing beats you fiddling for figuring out what works for your book and your audience, because your book and your audience are different than Mark's book and Mark's audience.
Yeah, Thomas, and that's one of the things that I'd want to share with your listeners is that what works for one person might not work for someone else. And my suspicion about why things work so well for Mark was he got in there super early and he wasn't competing with anyone else, or not many people. And probably the people he was competing with weren't even targeting books like he was. And then it became a super saturated market. And so people were trying to get the same results that he'd gotten, and the competition was too much. And I tried BookBub ads too, and nothing really worked well for me. And that doesn't mean that these things won't work for some of your listeners, but kind of like you're saying, I'd recommend trying to find one thing and do it well versus being mediocre at 3 or 4 different systems.
Well, I have a theory, another theory why Facebook may not have worked for you, in BookBub particularly. Your audience is a particularly conservative audience, and I don't know if they're on BookBub. And I don't know how active they are on Facebook, especially after the various purges of conservatives that have happened on Facebook over the years, where a lot of conversation that used to happen on Facebook has moved to Discord and Signal and Telegram and various other kind of off Facebook channels. So if you're targeting really conservative readers, it may be that they're just not there anymore. whereas Mark Dawson's readers are on Facebook. And so it may be that you would have seen better success on X, right? Targeting conservatives on X or on Truth Social or MeWe or Parler, right? One of the questions about advertising is not just how to do it, but where to do it, because different kinds of readers hang out in different kinds of places. And it used to be everyone was on Facebook. Everybody was on Facebook. It was basically a microcosm of the internet, and that's not true anymore. Now, very few people actually spend much time on Facebook on any given day.
That's a great point, Thomas. And so I think there are some approaches that work better for fiction versus nonfiction, and people that have a series. So people are willing to lose money on their first book or give it away for free, to get people to purchase books 2, 3, and 4 in that series. But when you've got one book like I did, you can't do that. And so I pivoted to Amazon ads and immediately experienced success, at least compared with the money I'd been losing on the other approaches. And I think just one nice thing with Amazon ads is people are on Amazon to buy. People are on Facebook to socialize. But if someone's on Amazon, then they went there to purchase something and they don't have to go to another site to make the purchase. Whereas you're trying to get people off Facebook to something else typically. And so, yeah, I threw myself into that and was tweaking and working on it and taking courses. And one of the guys that kind of came on the scene that interested me was Dave Chesson. I had appreciated some things he had done. And he has Publisher Rocket, which he had an Amazon course that he's updated. And so I don't get anything for mentioning Dave. I just appreciate what he does. And many of the things he does are for free. And so I'm happy to promote. I appreciate someone that's going to help people out for free like that. So he does have some paid stuff too, but he had an Amazon ads course for free. And I took that and I found it to be really beneficial. But one of the things, Thomas, that might surprise your listeners is Dave's a huge fan of manual targeting versus auto targeting. And so I'm going to assume most of your listeners know what I'm talking about, but if by chance they don't, then I'll just briefly explain those. So auto targeting is essentially taking advantage of Amazon's algorithms to sell your book or advertise your book. And because Amazon has so much data on its buyers, the auto targeting actually works very well, much better than you'd think. And I've heard some people bash it, but I've had trouble duplicating the success with manual targeting that I've had with auto targeting, which is, I'm kind of a guy that intuitively believes the harder you work, the better the results will be. And so I'm like in denial that auto targeting could work better than manual targeting. And I'm watching Dave's stuff where Dave has all these things you can do through Publisher Rocket to come up with good keywords for your ads. And, Thomas, no matter how hard I tried, I was never able to have the same success with manual targeting that I've had with auto targeting. And it's not for lack of effort or lack of spending. I mean, I've probably spent, I'd guess, $20,000 or $30,000 on manual targeting until finally just realizing, what, auto's easier and it works better for me.
Yeah, I want to stop you real quick because some people fell out of their chairs when they heard you say $20,000. So you were still profitable. So when you're spending $20,000, you're getting all of those $20,000 back and then some. But you're finding more success with auto targeting than with manual targeting. So it's not like you lost 20,000 that you never saw again.
That's right. Yeah, Thomas, I should have been clear about that. And I'm kind of looking at my dashboard here, and I don't know, I should have counted how many ads I have, but I probably run 753 or 750 campaigns, 750 campaigns that I've run. A lot of them are turned off because they weren't working well. And I guess maybe a third or a little more are manual. So I don't think there were any ads that entirely lost money, like you put in $100 and don't make any money from it. It's just that the average cost of sale, of spend, is going to be too high for what I want to do. And so I was just comparing a lot of ads, and the ones that were doing the best happened to be auto targeting. Now, one of the things I think, and this was kind of confirmed through some Amazon stuff on Readsy. They had an Amazon course that I was reading. Ricardo, if your listeners are familiar with him, he puts out some good stuff. And he said that he thought Amazon's auto targeting works much better with nonfiction than fiction. And I write nonfiction. And he's the first person to say that. And so perhaps that's why I've had more success with auto targeting versus manual targeting, is that my books are nonfiction. If you have listeners who are writing fiction, they might want to give manual targeting a shot. And I would recommend Dave's course on Amazon ads for that. But the nice thing with auto targeting is it's easier, and you're taking advantage of the algorithms and information that Amazon has available in targeting readers. And I just think it's very difficult to compete with that.
And I have an episode with Dave Chesson, actually several episodes with Dave Chesson, talking about Amazon page optimization and a lot of these techniques. So I encourage you to listen to those episodes. Get Publisher Rocket. If you're going to do ads on Amazon, the first $50 you spend should be on Publisher Rocket, because it's very inexpensive compared to what you're about to spend on advertising. And sometimes Publisher Rocket will come with a free course on Amazon marketing. They'll do promos from time to time, and sometimes we'll feature those promos on authormedia.social. So keep an eye out for that. But Publisher Rocket is a really reasonably priced, and it's typically a really good deal.
And even if I wasn't going to use it for ads, I'd use it just for categories and keywords and SEO. It's been an invaluable tool just for that, even though I've kind of turned away from using it for Amazon ads.
Yeah, it's very enlightening. When you don't have a tool that gives you data on categories and kind of the market, and you get a tool, it's like going from being blind to being able to see. And I like to say that Publisher Rocket is like your left eye and K-Lytics is like your right eye. And whichever of those tools somebody uses first, they tend to like more because it's whatever solved their blindness. But having both eyes gives you a little bit of depth perception and opens up your field of view a little bit. And I like both of those tools, but I will say Publisher Rocket is cheaper. So if you want the cheapest path to cure your marketing blindness, Publisher Rocket is what I recommend.
To piggyback from my last episode, why my time as a traditional publisher didn't go as well. I think I got picked up by Harvest House because they saw my sales and assumed, wow, if this guy can do that well as a self-published author and an indie author, then imagine, what he can do as a traditional author. And they're probably comparing me with most other authors who do well because they have a large platform, big name, lots of conferences, and I'm not in that category. I'm guessing most people probably haven't heard of me. I'm definitely not John MacArthur or Paul Tripp or something. And so what Harvest House didn't know was most of my sales came from Amazon ads. And so then once I switched to a traditional publisher, to Harvest House, and I have to unpublish my marriage book because that was my first book. And so I published this marriage book. It's doing really well. And when Harvest House offers me a multi-book deal, they want to republish Marriage God's Way as Your Marriage God's Way. So I have to unpublish it. And that was a painful thing because this is my book that's making me, you said at the beginning, I have many books now, but Marriage God's Way has always been the book that sells more than all my other books combined. So it's making me, $2,000, $2,500 per month. And I've got to unpublish that, say goodbye to that income, because then Harvest House republished it. It starts with no reviews, no traction with Amazon. All my ads are turned off. And that's my introduction to the traditional publishing world. So I'm kind of thinking, well, it's just going to sell itself. It's going to be great. If I'm doing this on my own, now it's just going to shoot into the stratosphere.
Or you think your publisher is going to buy ads for you, which in my experience just about never happens. And when they do buy ads, they tend to not be very sophisticated. Your typical savvy indie is often more sophisticated in their approach to advertising than your typical executive at a publishing house, which is not what you would expect. A lot of people think, oh, I'm with the professionals now. It's like, no, this is an English major who took a course on ads and kind of sort of knows what they're doing, but they don't really, not as well as you probably do if you've been fiddling with it for a long time.
Yeah, and the other thing, and I'll just add this in here, a brief detour, you're not going to be successful with ads no matter how well you learn them if you don't have a good book page on Amazon, description, and cover. And so I mention that because I'm not convinced that traditional publishers provide great book descriptions on Amazon. And so I remember I've seen some descriptions and I thought they looked very mediocre, and it came from a larger publisher. And even when Harvest House wrote my book descriptions, I was looking for like keywords, and I'm just not sure that they do that. And that's not necessarily criticism of Harvest House. It's just a commentary on traditional publishers in general, that's not, their world is like brick and mortar, so they're not going to be SEO experts. And so I'm kind of looking at this description, and I'm not kidding. I don't know if I could pick 3 or 4 keywords out of that description, whereas all of my descriptions on Amazon, book descriptions, are going to be saturated with as many keywords as I can get in there comfortably without keyword stuffing. And so that's kind of a big thing too, is I'd recommend to your listeners not to even head toward ads until they have the book itself down. the cover, the description, categories, the title even. Because if you get someone to click on your ad and they go to your book page and that doesn't sell them, then you just lost money on that click, right?
The most common thing I see happen with authors when they first start advertising is they realize that their book is not as appealing as they thought it was. Because typically for authors for their first book, they get a cover that they like, they get a description that they like, and their judgment for what's good and what's not good is their own personal preference. And advertising breaks them of that thinking. It's actually really beneficial to advertise your first book so that you get broken of thinking that it matters at all what you think. Because it doesn't, right? If you hate your cover and your readers love your cover and they won't stop clicking on it and buying it and giving you money, that's good. As opposed to, I love my cover. My readers don't really care for it. Nobody's really clicking on it. When I try to advertise, I lose money. But I like my cover. That's not good. It's like, this is a business that's all about thrilling readers. And once you start thrilling readers, then those readers will talk and word will spread and you will make money and you can do this profitably. And advertising will show you if you are even making a promise that will appeal to your readers. Because advertising has nothing to do with the quality of the actual writing. It's about the presentation of the book. And if you can describe your book in a way that's appealing. The only element of advertising that's connected with your writing is your reviews on Amazon, how many reviews you have and how favorable those reviews are. But that's only one small piece of your Amazon page, and all of the other pieces also really matter. And for more on how to optimize your Amazon page, do listen to that episode with Dave Chesson. We go through the whole page, section by section, with tips on how to optimize it, because it really is important, every piece of it.
And they've made it more complicated now with the Amazon A+ material that you can add. And that's kind of one of the things, too, with when Harvest House republished my marriage book, they had a pretty contemporary cover, this couple in a car looking at the sunset, and it just, I don't think it resonated with my conservative audience. And I remember when I first looked at the cover, I thought, this isn't, really what going to convince people what the book is. And sure enough, it didn't resonate. I had different people say, we liked your cover earlier, so that's the cover I returned to. So once I took that book down, put my books back up, the algorithms had all basically turned off and Amazon wasn't selling my book for me anymore. And that's one of the nice things for your readers to know is when they're kind of making that initial investment into Amazon ads, if they can get to the point that they're doing well with the ads, then Amazon will start selling your book for you. And so one of the things to understand when you're advertising on social media, let's say Facebook just wants to spend your money. They just want to use up your budget. But Amazon wants a good experience for their buyers. They consider it a success if they put your book in front of someone and someone buys it. That's what Amazon is trying to get, a sale. And so if they see that when they put your book in front of someone or that they buy it, then they're going to put your book in front of more people to produce more sales. And so when you can, and I haven't been able to do this for all my books. I haven't been able, in other words, I have not been able to get Amazon to sell all my books. But when they start doing that, you notice a real change in your sales, cost per click, the click-through rate and so forth. The other thing when you're setting up your ads that I had to kind of learn the hard way is the dashboard makes it seem like dynamic bids up and down is the way to go. And I don't know if you've had some people that have had success with that, but if I had like some of my top 4 or 5 things to pass along, that would be one of them. That no matter how much better the Amazon ads makes dynamic bidding up and down sound good, it never worked as well for me. I lost a lot of money. So I'm just dynamic down on all of my ads now. Anytime I went up and down, I lost too much.
One of the things about advertising and how these marketplaces work is it's the price that you pay per click is based off of supply and demand. So there will be days when the supply is much higher. So let's say it's an Amazon day and Amazon's buying TV ads and a lot of people are buzzing around Amazon, or it's Black Friday. But there's also more demand because people may be bidding higher. But in author world, there are courses that will just carpet bomb Amazon with new authors with big money to spend. And until those authors run out of money, the prices will all go up. So if you have dynamic up, your prices will go up and you're bidding against all of these brand new authors who are very eager to spend money because they just took a course on advertising. And if you're not careful, your otherwise profitable ads will stop being profitable. Whereas if you're like, I know this ad is profitable at 30 cents a click, but it's not profitable at 50 cents a click. And so you set a max at 30 cents, and then you just don't get clicks if the auction goes beyond what you can bid. And that little bit of financial discipline really adds up, because you're like, it's just 20 cents. It's like, no, it's 20 cents per click. There's a lot of clicks in this world that can add up to a lot. That can be your profit margin if you're not careful.
Yeah, that's a great point, Thompson. I actually, until you just said that, I wasn't aware that that's what was happening, but it makes sense because I've definitely seen that where some days have been so much better, or let's say so much worse than others. And it's when you're trying to compete with this flood or some new books that are launched that are close to your niche. And the only way to compete with them is to have a high cost per click. And that's one of the other problems with being traditionally published is if you only make, 80 cents or $1 per book, your cost per click is going to be 10, 15 cents, and you can't even make a sale at that. Whereas if you're indie published and you can make $4 or $5 per royalty, then you can have a 40, 50 cent cost per click and still be profitable. So that's why I definitely recommend trying to make sure you keep good awareness of your cost per click on your ads so you know what's profitable. And then I've always kind of ratcheted them up to where I could tell them, I don't want to lose money. Everyone knows if you could spend $1,000 and make $1,001 from that, you would just keep spending $1,000, right? So you're always kind of ratcheting up.
A lot of people are like, why would I want to spend $1,000 to make $1,001? Because you're acquiring readers, and some of those readers are going to read your book, and some of those people are going to love your book, and they're going to become advocates for your book. And this is how you build a movement behind your writing. You've got to get readers somehow. And if you can do it profitably, even if it's only profitable by a single dollar, that is a perpetual motion machine, because you've now gotten back all of your $1,000, which means you can go buy $1,000 worth of new readers, and you get back the $1,000, and you just keep doing that over and over again until you have a lot of readers. But if you're losing money with every $1,000 that you spend, the perpetual motion machine will eventually completely run out of money. Every cycle around, there's less money and less money and less money. So getting it to the point where it's profitable, even just a tiny bit, is the goal, I would say, with all kinds of advertising, because as long as it's profitable, you can just keep doing it. And I have an interview with Connor Boyack, who did this with Facebook ads, spending millions of dollars a year on Facebook ads because he can do it profitably. He sends $1 million of ads out, and he gets more than $1 million worth of ads back, and he's turned the Tuttle Twins into an absolute titan in his niche. And so one of the key techniques here is not to copy Scott's techniques in the sense of like the ads are a certain way, or like he's doing Amazon over Facebook. It's this experimental mindset to find out what works for you. And if you get some ideas and you experiment with them and see if you can make them work. And if you can do that, that can make the difference between being known by millions of readers and not being known by anybody.
Yeah, and one of the things I think I'll share, Thomas, that I think will resonate with your readers is most of us write not strictly or maybe even primarily for financial reasons. We write because we enjoy someone reading what we've produced. And so what I mean by that is a lot of people would be happy to write and sell a lot of copies even if they could just break even, because they know that there are people write blogs for free and they spend a lot of time and don't make any money from it. And just one example, I was speaking at I've spoken at a handful of homeschool conferences, and I'm let's say there's three types of speakers. There's your workshop speakers, the lowest, and then the keynote speakers, the top, and then there's kind of these featured speakers in the middle. So I'm kind of in the middle. Now the workshop speakers are losing money. They're going to these conferences, setting up booths, maybe having one or two messages that aren't even, very well attended. They're flying places, paying for the hotel, renting the car. The keynote speakers are getting pretty large honorariums. It could be $10,000, $20,000. And I'm kind of in the middle where I basically get my expenses covered. And I'm walking around at some of these conferences, and I'm noticing some people that don't even have people frequenting their booths. And so I'm guessing they're not selling very much. And as you're with someone for like a whole weekend, you have a lot of time to talk. And I talked to a few people, maybe people in a booth across from me or next to me, and saying, how's it going? How much have you sold? And they'll tell me they haven't really sold anything. And I'm like, well, how do you get your costs covered? And they're like, I don't get my costs covered. And I'm like, well, So anyway, here's the point, Thomas. You learn pretty quickly that people want so badly for people to know them or know their material or buy some of their books that they'll lose money to do that. I mean, people will fly across the country, pay for a hotel, rent a car, the plane tickets, thousands of dollars to sell a few $100s, if that, of books. And so the point is, if you're writing books, you can have a lot of satisfaction simply from knowing that there are people buying your books. So even if you can run Amazon ads and sell hundreds of books and just break even. And I've never been the most profitable guy, because as soon as I can see the ads are doing well, I ratchet them up until I'm almost to the point where I just break even with them.
Which is exactly what Amazon wants you to do. So Amazon ads are a way for Amazon to basically keep all of the money. So it's very cynical on their part, right? The authors who spend the most on ads get in front of the most readers. And so the more of your profits you're willing to share with Amazon, the more copies you sell.
Yeah. And so to me, it's just satisfying. I write these Christian books that are drawn from my sermons, and I like to think God's using them in people's lives to draw people closer to Christ or strengthen marriage or help them, it's my finance book, help them be better stewards of their finances. And so that's a blessing to me. Whereas if I had to live off my author income, that'd be a lot tougher. And so maybe one of the other things I'll address is ACOS. And so ACOS is an important number, I think, the advertising cost of sales. And just for me, I want to keep that below 40%, close to about 35%. And so when I see ads are running above that, then those are the ones that I turn off, or I turn off part of that ad.
And this number, for those of you who've never done Amazon ads, you don't have to calculate it. This isn't like you have to download the special author media spreadsheet and track it. This number Amazon gives you it's right there in your report. So it's one really easy way to keep score.
So if you're running manual targeting, then what happens is you're going to have anywhere. So the way I used to work with manual targeting is you'd have, I'm not kidding, like 1,000 keywords per campaign. And that's one of the reasons Publisher Rocket was so valuable, because it would give you those 1,000 keywords. Now in Dave's recent Amazon course, he's saying that's the old approach. The new approach is to have about 20 keywords. So if you've got 100 keywords, you're going to group them into categories of about 20, 5 groups, and those 20 keywords are going to be closely related to each other. So for example, if I'm running ads for my finance book, I might have 20 keywords that are associated with stewardship, 20 keywords associated with giving, 20 keywords that are associated with spending or maybe paying off debt. And once you have the ads associated with those keywords, you can manage those better.
And do you customize the marketing copy for each one of those ad groups? So the debt marketing copy uses the word debt, whereas the stewardship marketing keywords has the words about stewardship.
When you start your ad, you're going to choose custom text or standard ad. Custom text means you're going to write a little 150 character blurb about your book. Standard ad means there's no blurb associated with your book. And the other distinction between those two is if you do custom text, all you can advertise is different versions of that book. So for example, I can advertise the paperback, the hardback, and the ebook for my marriage book, but I can't advertise the accompanying marriage workbook or handout. So I have 3 marriage books. I have the book, the workbook, and then the handout for conferences. And if I do a custom text, because they assume that text is associated or directed just at one book, you can only advertise that book. If you choose a standard ad, there's no text. You don't have to write up a blurb. You can advertise as many different books as you want. I wouldn't really recommend that unless those books are closely related. So I'll advertise my marriage book and workbook together. If I had a series, like let's say some space trilogy or something like that, it would make sense to advertise with standard ads and have all of those trilogy books in the same campaign. But if you've got one book that's on space, you've got another one that's on fantasy or military, you don't want to be advertising those books in the same campaign, because it's not going to allow Amazon to develop a good algorithm for your ad. Now, one of the things I want to say is, just as I had to learn kind of the hard way, or I've become convinced that bidding down is better than up and down, I've become convinced that standard ads are equal to custom text. So it's one more thing where the easier approach is as good, or maybe even some ads better. So you just kind of think like, well, custom text, then you're working harder, you're doing more, you're putting together some blurb. I don't think you can keyword stuff custom text. I don't think that, I know that the book title, the subtitle, the book description are all used in algorithms, but I'm not very convinced that custom text benefits the ad that you're running. And so if someone asked me and said, what would you do, Scott? Would you run a couple ads with custom text, or with that extra free time, create multiple ads that are standard ads without custom text? I would definitely say go with the standard ads without custom text.
And I really like that thinking. That's the next best alternative thinking, which is exactly how to think as a marketer. So you don't ask, will this work or not, right? Because holding a cardboard sign at the street corner can work. You will sell some books that way. And so that question leads you to bad answers. The real question is, how does this compare to my next best alternative? So it's like, I could stand by the side of the road for 8 hours holding a cardboard sign. Maybe I'll sell half a dozen copies. What else could I do that could do better than that? And then you start generating a list and you find the very best performing things. So the question is not, does custom text work, or could custom text work? It's what will work for the investment. And the thing about custom text is, to make it work, you have to be really good at copywriting. And copywriting is not an art, it's a science. And it's been a science for decades. So going back to the 1960s, they've had different versions of sales letters that they would mail out to people via the post office. And they'd have different 1-800 numbers. And they could know which letter got more calls, right? So the A version of the letter got 500 calls and the B version of the letter got 700 calls. And we've had now 70 years plus of science to really figure out copywriting. And it's a completely different approach to writing than what you learned in your books about crafting a good novel, and even potentially what you learned in your book about writing for nonfiction. And if you haven't studied copywriting, your best bet's actually probably to use AI. I would say AI is better than an untrained human, but trained humans still better than the AI, but that's really complicated. It's very difficult. Copywriting, it's very difficult to do well. So I would say poor copy is worse than no copy at all. Just having a bigger version of your cover is very safe, especially if your cover is really strong.
I think even if you write good copy or you have a good custom text, I don't even think it benefits the book that much.
Wow.
And I say that because I've had ads, and the ones that have done better were not ones that had better custom text. I'm led to believe, and again, I'm $70,000 or $60,000 total I've spent on Amazon ads, so I think I have a lot of experience with it. And I have not found, not only have I not found that custom text does better than standard ads, I haven't found that the custom text with the best copy does better than those ads that has poor copy. So then you say, it begs the question, well, what is it that allows an ad to become successful? It kind of seems random, and it kind of seems what Amazon gets behind. And here's the thing. Here's the reason I say that. You can create 50 ads and 40 of them aren't even going to go live. I don't know why, but they won't even spend, Amazon won't even spend any money on them. And so there's a lot of ads you're going to create, and you can't get Amazon to spend money on them. You can crank up the cost per click, but out of 20 ads, only 5 of them spend money. And that's why you really need to create a lot of them, see which ones work, turn off the ones that don't so that you don't spend more money, and then polish those ones that are going well. And so I would say Amazon ads is not a set it and forget it type approach. You need to be checking in when you're doing manual targeting, which I'm not going to say I've discouraged it. I would say give it a shot, but just understand it's not absolutely the way to go. When you do manual targeting, you've got to manually supervise all of those keywords you've added. That's a lot to be turning off and trying to figure out whether you should turn it off or not. And it's like, if I turn it off right now, is it going to get a sale tomorrow? And so there's always this kind of nagging fear about how much should I spend on this before I turn off this keyword. Well, you could have 20 keywords or 100, or it used to be 999 or 1,000 keywords. If you do auto targeting, you've only got 4 things to watch. There's 4 automatic targeting groups. There's loose match, substitutes, complements, and close match. And you can see them all right in here. You can see the bid for each of them. And when one of those is doing well, you let it run. And when one of those groups is doing poorly, you turn it off. What I would tell your listeners, though, is be careful to turn off a campaign or ad completely. It's unlikely that an entire ad is going to be bad. An entire campaign is bad. And what I mean by that is, if you're running a manual campaign, don't turn the whole campaign off. Turn off those keywords that are not working well for you. If you're doing auto targeting, don't turn off the whole campaign. Turn off loose match. Loose match kind of seems to me to be the one that spends the most money and often is losing money. So that's almost always the first one that I turn off when I turn something off. Close match is often going to be making you money because it's closely matched to your book, right? So if you're super concerned about the money you're spending, keep the ad on and turn off loose match, substitutes, complements, and just let close match keep running. But after you spend some money, you'll start seeing which of these targeting groups is working well for your ad, and then you can log in and refine and polish that way.
What are your thoughts about defensive ads? One of the things I'll notice when I do a search for a traditionally published author is that there's often an indie author who ranks for their name above the actual author's name. When I type in John Smith, an indie author, John Jones, will be buying the John Smith ad. So with really similar books, right? So they both write the same kind of books, but John Smith, because he's traditionally published, his publisher isn't buying ads for his name unless he's in the very top tier. But John Jones, who's indie, is, and some authors will buy ads for their own name defensively. And I've noticed, I just did a search for Scott LaPierre, and I noticed that when I do a search for your name, you're sponsoring your own name. So Your Marriage God's Way comes up as this ad, and then it actually comes up as both ads. So all three of the top results are different versions of Your Marriage God's Way.
Yeah, that's a good question, Thomas. And so when I have run manual ads, I do have my name as a keyword. And the reason it's worth it, it comes down to a question of cost. If I had to pay a bunch of money for my name to be a keyword, a successful one, I probably wouldn't do it because I would assume that people can find my own books pretty easily. But here's the thing, Thomas, if you look at my keywords with my name, the ACoS, I'm spending so little per click because one of the big things is relevancy. And let me share this. This is super important. Relevancy is a major variable in terms of your success because Amazon wants to put products in front of people that target what they're searching for. The reason everyone loves Amazon is they can go to Amazon and they can get what they're searching for. When you go and you search for camping equipment, you don't get laptops coming up. And so it's the same in the book world. When someone searches for a Christian theology book, they don't want to see paranormal fantasy or something. So Amazon really focuses on relevancy and putting those books or materials in front of people that are relevant to the search that they entered. And that's one thing people don't understand. Amazon is not, you can't be successful with Amazon and think that it's a bookstore. You need to understand it's a search engine. As soon as you approach Amazon, like you should approach Google or YouTube, because Amazon's the second biggest search engine behind Google, tied with YouTube. So as soon as you look at Amazon and say, okay, it's not a store any longer, I recognize it is a search engine. So now I will use SEO or I will optimize to increase my sales. Then you know that what Amazon does is it puts those products that are relevant. Well, because Scott LaPierre is very relevant to me, that keyword is incredibly cheap. So it's worth putting your own name just because you're going to pay 2 cents per click for it. And I don't want someone else to put Scott LaPierre and get that click that when they were looking for me and go buy someone else's book.
It helps protect your sales because I've made more than one purchase on Amazon where I will do a product search and, it's like, I want the non-caffeinated version and it will surface caffeinated versions of the thing. And if I'm not carefully reading the page, I'll get the caffeinated version of the thing when what I specifically searched for was non-caffeinated. And so we assume that Amazon search is better than it is. Hopefully Rufus will make Amazon search better soon. Their AI powered search will hit the market at some point. But as we record this, Rufus is not really helping with search yet. And so we still have Amazon's lame Google circa 2006 search engine. And it's not particularly sophisticated. And I suspect for most authors, it's worth it for them to bid on their own name. if for no other reason than to just keep somebody else from getting it. This is a kind of advertising we studied about in business school called defensive advertising, where Coca-Cola will buy the sponsorship of the Little League stadium just to keep Pepsi off the stadium. It's not necessarily that they think the ad will be profitable, but they don't want to open up room for Pepsi to come in, or RC Cola or Dr. Pepper or whoever.
Well, it's going to be so cheap. If you put Thomas Umstattd as one of your keywords, you're going to get that keyword for like 3 cents a click versus 40 cents a click. And so it's
and
just
I'll get
worth
it cheaper than the other guy. And so might as well. I have the high ground, so why not take that click when I can get it for so cheap?
Yeah. And what happens if you say, oh, it's my name, I don't need to have it as a keyword. And then someone else has Thomas Umstattd as a keyword. And so because the thing is, if you don't have your name as a keyword, there's other people that are using Thomas Umstattd or Scott LaPierre as keywords. And then if they're bidding enough, then when someone searches for Scott LaPierre, their book, not Scott LaPierre's book, is going to come up, and you could potentially lose that sale. So
this is one of the key techniques that a lot of these courses on Amazon Ads teach, is go find all the authors who write similar books to your book and put them in as keywords. This is a classic technique. And so if you don't have those ads running defensively, you could be missing out on a lot of sales, especially if the covers are really similar, especially if you're writing genre fiction where readers aren't as particular. They may not scroll down, and they may not even realize right away that the book is by a different author, depending on how discriminating they are. This is also a good way of judging a traditional publisher. So if you're thinking about going with the traditional publisher, go look in their most recently published books, look kind of past their very top 5 or 6 authors, and just do a search for those author names on Amazon and see if they rank for their own names or see if somebody else is outbidding them. You may find for some publishers they do a good job with defensive advertising, and other publishers do not.
An obvious question then, if we're talking about bidding cost per click, is what do you set it as? And it's kind of another thing where nicely, I think the easier approach is the better one. I think Amazon has, or the dashboard has, the option to apply the suggested bid, use the KDP or Amazon suggested bid. And why do I think that's the best approach? Because Amazon knows what you need to bid to be able to compete for that keyword or that targeting category. So for example, let's say that Amazon says it's going to be $1.25 and you say that's too much money. I only want to spend 40 cents. If you put it at 40 cents, you're never going to get any clicks for that. So for me, I would rather put the suggested bid from Amazon, because they know what has to be spent to be competitive for that keyword. And then if I can't be profitable at that price, then I'll just turn that off. But I'm never going to know to turn it off unless I'm bidding high enough to be competitive. So I hope that makes sense, and you can fix it up if that was too confusing.
I think you're right, but it makes me sad because it's Amazon's way of encouraging bigger bids, because they're constantly encouraging people to bid a little bit more than what they want to bid. And if they can encourage everyone to do that, it's this kind of collective action issue. Like if everyone refused to spend more than 10 cents a bid, like if all authors only bid 10 cents a bid, that's all we'd have to pay, right? It's the fact that people are bidding against each other that the prices go up. So, but you're right. You do have to ultimately win. Right. And in this is one of the few areas in publishing where it really is zero sum. Most authors, most of the marketing they do is just good for marketing in general. It's good for the act of reading. We're helping get people excited about reading, getting people excited about our genre, what have you. Our biggest competition is Netflix. But with advertising on Amazon, only one person is going to rank number 1 for a particular search keyword. And if it's not you, it's somebody else. In that one context, it is zero sum. And so if you're not at the top of the mountain, you're not on the mountain at all in many cases. And so there is an incentive to bid and bid and bid. And some people who are very happy to lose money, they just want to get their book out there, will outbid you. And you have to have the discipline to fold when you don't have the cards and to not bid yourself into poverty.
Yeah, well, there's 3 options. You can choose dynamic up and down, you can choose dynamic down, or fixed bids. I've never done fixed bids. If you do fixed bids, that means you're going to pay that amount, whether 40 cents, 50 cents per click. But if you do dynamic down, even if you're bidding 50 cents, Amazon might still only spend 20 cents or 25, or if it's your name, like we were talking about early, maybe 4 or 5 cents. And so if your book is particularly relevant to that search, you're likely not going to spend near what you have put as the suggested bid. But the problem is if you're not putting that suggested bid, you're going to be looking at your dashboard and you're going to say, why isn't Amazon even spending any of my money? Why don't I even, and if you don't get Amazon to spend your money, you can't refine anything. You can't adjust. You don't know what to turn off because you don't have enough material from your ads to judge what's working and what's not working. And so one other thing is, people don't know this, but the dashboard is not that accurate to the moment. It seems to me, in my experience, to be a day or more behind. And so what I mean by that is, if you're looking at your ads right now and they look like they're doing super poorly, when you look tomorrow, you'll probably see sales that you didn't see today. It takes a bit of time for the sales to catch up with the spend.
Particularly for paper books. So for accounting reasons, Amazon doesn't count a paper book as being sold until it leaves the warehouse where it ships, I believe is how they do it. Whereas the ad, all of that action in terms of charging you for the click happens once the click happens. So there's this nexus of time between the click and the shipping of the book where it's like Schrodinger's sale. Is it a sale or is it not a sale? Well, we know it's for sure a sale when, the box leaves the warehouse. I don't know if it's as delayed with ebooks. That part of it may be just a reporting issue. Real-time data is really expensive. And so having a 1 or 2 hour delay saves Amazon some compute cost. And right now, compute costs is really expensive because everyone's going crazy for AI and all the servers are maxed out. So it is interesting how AI is affecting all the rest of the internet because every spare cycle seems to be going to power one LLM or another. But that is a topic for Author Update. And if you want to hear more about AI, listen to Author Update. I do want to ask about audiobooks because I know that you advertise your audiobooks and a lot of authors think that this is impossible. That can't be true. That's impossible. So how do you advertise your audiobooks on Amazon?
Yeah, so I stumbled on that when I got a traditional publisher. I didn't have access to my books through the Amazon dashboard because my books belong to Harvest House, but I still wanted to try to advertise them. So I set up another advertising account that allows me to advertise anyone's books or materials on Amazon. All you need to do is put in the ASIN. And I thought, you know what, I could advertise my audiobook this way too. So that was my introduction to I could advertise anyone else's book. I started advertising my audiobooks. And then when I got my books back and can now advertise my books through the KDP dashboard, I've kept that other advertising console, that other advertising account open simply to advertise my audiobooks. And I have a separate ACoS for those based on what percent of what size royalty I get from the audiobooks. But yeah, that's a good thing. People are surprised.
So this is just an advertising.amazon.com account, not a KDP advertising account?
Yeah, it's advertising.amazon.com.
So we'll have a link to this in the show notes. There's actually a whole other advertising engine on Amazon. A lot of authors don't know about. In fact, I think there's 3 because you also have one through your author dashboard, I think. So I think there's 3 different places to buy ads. Most authors just use the KDP dashboard, but the Amazon ads dashboard is for all products, I believe. It's not just books, but your USB cables or whatever. If you're selling those, this is where you would advertise them. So this is actually what most people think of when they think of ads. There's a whole world of Amazon that's not just books. I know Amazon started with us, but now we're kind of an afterthought. They make a lot of money selling diapers and all kind of wine and cars and everything you can imagine. And there's a whole world of advertising specialists beyond kind of the author ones. And once you are on advertising.amazon.com, you get into that world a little bit. So for somebody who is tried their hand at ads, let's say they spent $100, $200, and it wasn't very successful, and they have decided that ads don't work. What encouragement or advice would you give that person?
First, I'd say, how many ads did you run? How many different campaigns? If it was only 1 or 2 ads, that's not nearly enough. And I don't think $100 to $200 is nearly enough either. And so I'd say try to create somewhere between 10 to 20 ads and be willing to spend a few $100s more than that on it. Give it a shot, check them each day, and turn off those ads or categories or keywords that are not profitable to save your budget.
ScottLaPierre.org is the website. We'll have a link to it in the show notes. I do recommend that you check out Your Marriage God's Way. In fact, I'm thinking about buying this book for myself, as a matter of fact. I encourage you to check him out, follow his email newsletter, and do some searches for marriage type topics and see if he comes up. You may just be able to steal some ideas that way. Scott, do you have any final tips or encouragement?
I'd say keep at it. It can be discouraging at first. We all have a real strong burden. You know, we pour our hearts into these books. We want people to read them. And I really think that Amazon ads is one of the best ways to get your book in front of readers.
Our featured patron is Ryder Jones, author of Welcome to Westville. Ryder Jones, thank you so much for being a patron of the Novel Marketing Podcast. Thank you for your support that helps keep this podcast on the air. I really appreciate it. The Novel Marketing Podcast is a production of authormedia.com, and you can find the blog version of this episode along with links to everything we talked about at authormedia.com/458. I'm Thomas Umstattd Jr. saying thank you for listening and live long and prosper.